Hello guys, today I've got a quick review for you of this Vickers Vincent Mk I in 1/72 scale from Azur. Now this is one of those kits which I bought, well, for two reasons really. Firstly because I haven't built a kit from this company before, and I do like to explore different kits from different companies. And secondly because I really like the paint scheme. You can just about see this here slightly faded on the box art. This is the LT4 Lands Tropical 4 colour scheme, which is a 6-colour RAF camouflage scheme that you don't see very often. We'll take a closer look at that scheme in a bit, but first a bit of background on the Vincent. The Vincent was based on the Vickers Vildebeest single-engine biplane, which was first flown in 1928. Now the Vildebeest was designed as a torpedo bomber, but in 1931 Vickers developed a general-purpose version of it, which would be known as the Vincent. It was a relatively simple conversion from the Vildebeest to the Vincent, and trials were carried out in the Middle East and East Africa. The main differences were the removal of the torpedo equipment, an auxiliary fuel tank being added, and message pickup and signalling equipment being added. Vincents were delivered to the RAF in 1934, with 197 being built in total. While the Vildebeests in their torpedo bomber role were used in the Malaya campaign in late 1941 and early 1942, with, it has to be said, quite limited success, Vincents were used in Iraq and in East Africa against Italian forces. Vincents were pulled from frontline service in 1943 and from service in 1944. Let's take a closer look at the box, and we've got that lovely box art on the front of this Vincent, presumably somewhere in East Africa, having attacked that convoy in the background there, which is now ablaze. And that image gives us a hint there of that 6-colour camo scheme. Not much information on the side. We can see that this was designed in France and it was tooled and moulded in the Czech Republic. And the second long side has just a basic couple of warnings on it. Azur first released their tooling of the Vildebeest in 2011 in the form of their Mark III version. That was re-released with some new parts in 2012 as the Spanish Vildebeest, and then this kit I have here was released in 2013 as the Vickers Vincent, again with a couple of new parts. This kit has also been released by Special Hobby in a seaplane version with floats, in a Mark IV version with a Pegasus engine, and as a Vildebeest Mark III. So looking inside the box, we've got some decals, we have an instruction booklet, and relatively few sprues. We'll have a look at the instruction booklet first, and then we'll come back to the sprues. So we've got a good history of the kit on the front, and then inside we can see that we've got black and white diagrams, a sprue map on the left, a few parts there that are not needed. That's the torpedo from the Vildebeest version, and a couple of the wheels as well. We've got a colour call out there in guns colours, which I'll talk about more later because it's going to be quite hard to find the appropriate colours. And then we've got this incredibly busy step 1 here for the instructions. You can see just how many things we're doing here. We're doing all of the cockpit detail, the seat belts, which I think are photo etch, instrument panels, just about everything that goes in the interior, and the sides of the cockpit closed up there, all in one step. I think that has to hold the record for the most pieces put together in a single step in the instructions. And of course it's quite cluttered because we've got lots of paint call outs there as well. And the funny thing is, over the page, the next step is actually a continuation of step 1. So we've got some more parts to add to the interior there before we can actually put those two halves together. Step 2 goes completely the other direction. We have the lower wing to add and a ring there around the upper fuselage. That's it, your 2 parts for step 2. Step 3 has us adding a couple of parts, including the tail and the elevators. Step 4 looks like things could get a bit tasty. We've got some struts here which are used to hold up the top wing, the upper wing. I've never built a biplane before, so I'm interested to see how this is going to work. It looks like we've got some instructions there for some rigging as well. So I suspect that will be interesting, and possibly some drilling going on too. So I suspect I need to read that quite carefully and probably several times. Over the page. The engine goes in. Then step 6, we have a couple of options for the wheels depending on what version we're building. We've got either the shrouded or the unshrouded versions. And it looks like we have a different tail wheel as well. Step 7, we add the payload, which is 4 bombs on each wing. I believe they're included as resin parts. Step 8, I'm not quite sure what's going on in step 8. L18 gets added. Looks like some very fine parts there. Okay, I'm not quite sure what they are. Possibly some photo etch parts. And the propeller. Then the rear-facing defensive machine gun in step 9. I think some rigging possibly in step 10. And then, yes, definitely some rigging further on there. Then we move on to the colour schemes. We've got 4 colour schemes in this kit. They're all quite different, but I don't think the black and white diagrams really do them justice. So I have managed to find colour versions of this. I think the special hobby kit includes colour versions of these instructions. So we'll go through this and I'll show you a colour version of the same thing. So the first version is from Aden in Yemen, August 1940. And this is the LT4 colour scheme, the Lands Tropical 4 colour scheme. And it's a 6 colour scheme. So basically we have 3 colours on the upper wings. You can just about see those there. It's easier if you look at the labels. And then we have 3 colours on the lower wing, which are the shadow compensating versions of the upper wing colours. So there we go with the colour version where it's much easier to see. So those upper wing colours are dark earth, dark red sand, and dark sea green. None of which, as far as I can tell, are produced by any model making companies, so I'm going to have to try to figure out a colour match for those. Then the shadow compensating colours on the lower wings are the dark sand, the red sand, and the light sea green. And what we mean by shadow compensating is, of course, the lower wing is going to be in the shade of the upper wing and therefore naturally appear darker. So to compensate for that, the paint colours are lighter. You can see we've also got the same effect on the fuselage, where the top half of the fuselage is in the darker colours and the lower half is in those lighter compensating colours. This is going to be a fun one to paint. And the underside of this is going to be in doped aluminium. So that's a great scheme. That's the scheme I'm going to be doing without a doubt. But let's look at the other schemes anyway. I do think there's a great selection in this kit, everyone really different. So next up we have the 1942 scheme, and this is the desert scheme that you might be familiar with the middle stone and the dark earth. And that's over an azure blue underside. So that's your standard RAF desert scheme for basically most of the war. The third scheme over here is again a standard RAF scheme. It's dark earth and dark green over what is labelled as duck egg green, which I'm guessing is probably just your standard RAF sky, or one version of it. And that is from May 1943 at Lake Grasmere, which I believe is in New Zealand. And the fourth scheme here is also quite a nice one. I would maybe go for this as my second option if I didn't do the LT4 scheme. This is from the Service Flying Training School, March 1940 to August 1941, with the top side in the RAF dark earth and dark green, and the underside and the side of the fuselage in doped aluminium. So again, although the top side there is similar to the previous scheme, the underside is different, so it's nice to have those variations. I'm not a fan of kits that give you 4 schemes, but they're all the same paint scheme and it's just a different serial number on each one. I know sometimes that can't be helped, some aircraft only fought in, one camo scheme, but it's nice to get a variation when it's available. So as I say, I will have to look carefully at what colours I'm going to use for this. At the moment, just sort of looking at it casually, to me a XF49 khaki looks like a match for that A colour there, which is the dark earth. Maybe one of their desert sand colours, XF59, maybe XF60, maybe mixed in with the khaki for the shadow compensating version. For the dark red sand, I have no idea what colour I'm going to use there. Maybe XF64 with some red in it? I'm not sure. And for the green, again, that looks to me quite close to XF5 green, or is it XF11, which is one of the Japanese green colours? Of course, the real difficulty here is going to be making sure that I mix enough of the colour so that I can paint everything I need and maybe have a bit left over for touch-ups. Because of course one of the things about mixing your own colours is it's really difficult to get the same exact match again in the future. Even if you keep a note of the ratios, you just can't get exactly the same colour. Okay, I've been talking enough about the paint schemes now, so let's move on to the kit itself. We have 4 plastic sprues, 1 set of clear parts, some resin parts and some photo etch. This is the first plastic sprue. As you can see, it's a fuselage half, engraved panel line detail there on the outside, with the tubular frame detail on the inside. I was quite surprised by how short this bomber was, especially when we compare it to the next sprue, which contains the wings. So the wings are roughly, 21 centimeters wide, while the fuselage itself is only 12 centimeters in length. The texture looks really good here on the wings. We've got the ribbing there, and that's on both sides, with, I believe, no ejector pin marks. I believe those raised circular sections there are actually details, they're not ejector pin marks. So that looks quite interesting, it looks like it should build up nicely. We've got a small, quite well detailed machine gun there. The 2-blade propeller there with a small amount of flash, which should hopefully just cut off. Our third sprue contains various parts for the wheels, the fuel tank, and a few other bits and pieces. I suspect this is probably the additional piece for the Vincent conversion, since that has different wheels and of course it has the auxiliary fuel tank. As is quite common with some of these shorter run kits, it looks like we don't have any alignment pins on the 2 halves there of the tank or the wheels. In fact, it looks like the wheels will need a bit of sanding to make their mating faces flat. But that's nothing major. Our 4th and final plastic sprue also contains some wheels, but as I say, I don't think we'll use those. And this has all of these struts that go between the wings. We can see there at the edge of the torpedo halves, which again we won't be using for this version. We have a bag of resin parts, quite a few of which have broken off in the bag. So first and foremost, we've got the bombs here, 4 per block, and we've got 2 blocks. And on each one, all but one has fallen off. Luckily, I don't think they've been damaged as they came off. We've then got this rather nice looking resin engine. So that's got lots of details there that should hopefully take a paint and a wash and a dry brush nicely. Then we have the, this must be the fins for the bombs. And a few details here for the cockpit, including the control column there. finally we have the decal sheet with a variety of roundels. This early period of the war, of course, was when the RAF roundels were changing quite often, so we've got almost every version there you can think of. Not too many stencils on this actually. We've got a few there, but nothing really tiny or fiddly by the looks of it. And last but not least, we have the photo etch parts. We have photo etch pieces here for the bomb racks, for the seat belts, and for a few of the pieces which I didn't notice in the instructions, but I'm sure they'll become clear as I build this kit. And that brings us to the end of our look at this Vickers Vincent Mk I from Azur. I hope you enjoyed this look at the kit. As I say, I'm really looking forward to painting this camo scheme. I think it'll really stand out on the shelf. I was reading a book recently called Britain Alone by Paul Lucas. That covers RAF camouflage schemes from June 1940 to December 1941, and there are so many different variations in there, it's incredible. And that's where I first learnt about the LT4 scheme that I talked about in this video, and the LT3 scheme, which has 2 colours plus 2 more for the shadow compensation. It really does cover a huge range of camo schemes, and I was tempted for a while there, and I still kind of am, to have a go at creating an aircraft in each of the camo schemes that the RAF used. Of course, that's quite a big project, and there are so many variations, because even with something like the temperate land scheme, which is dark earth and dark green, you've got different variations of the underside. You've got the aluminium underside, you've got the black and white divided underside, you've got the doped aluminium underside, so many different options to go for. Nevertheless, I do like dipping into it, having a look at a camo scheme and thinking, yeah, I want to build that, let's find a model that goes with it. Anyway guys, I should go before I waffle on too much. Before I do, let me say thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, have fun modelling.